Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November 2nd, 2021 City Council meeting. As usual, we will start this meeting with our Chaplain Prayer and then followed by our pledges. And today, Lorenzo Hatch from our police department, who is the chaplain, will lead us in both.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for the opportunity to gather once again as a council and community. Send your Holy Spirit upon each of the members. Give them wisdom to discern your will and courage to carry it out. Bless and protect all our city employees and their families, especially the brave men and women of our police and fire departments. We ask this in all things through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, one indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. The first proclamation goes as follows. The City Council of San Angelo strives to further pursue wholeheartedly the vision of being the Texas standard for opportunity, prosperity, and quality of life. The City Council of San Angelo supports the right to life for all San Angelo citizens, beginning in the womb and throughout the individual's lifespan. This involves standing against all injustice, giving awareness and attention to issues that affect our citizens, and advocating for a better San Angelo in all facets. The City Council of San Angelo believes the protection of all human life is important to the people of the City of San Angelo. The City Council of San Angelo believes human life begins at conception and continues uninterrupted until the moment of natural death. The City Council of San Angelo believes all human life must be protected. The City Council hereby makes a committed effort to support and protect the health, welfare, and life of all residents within the City of San Angelo from conception until natural death by standing in support of the Texas Legislature's commitment to life through the implementation of legislation protecting unborn human life. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim San Angelo as a city supportive of all efforts to promote life within our community from the time of conception and call upon all residents to work to create a community where all life is respected and all families are supported, providing the structure for all to live peacefully in unity. The second proclamation today is on adoption. Do we have folks here? Please come forward. All children deserve a safe place to live and grow, and each year many Texas children find a forever home thanks to adoptive families. In Tom Green County, there are many children currently in foster care awaiting a forever family to bring them home. During the month of November, communities across the country come together to observe National Adoption Month to encourage and complete the adoptions of children in foster care and to celebrate the families who choose to adopt. The City of San Angelo recognizes National Adoption Month in support of the adoptive families here in our own community and encourages others to open their hearts and children in need of loving and permanent homes. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim November 2021 as National Adoption Month and call on all citizens to remember the children and families who have joined their lives through the miracle of adoption. open their hearts and minds to the idea of opening their own homes to children in need, and congratulate the new families to be formed during National Adoption Month.
Good morning. My name is Miranda Smith, and I'm with the Adoptions Unit here in San Angelo. And I would like to thank the community support for our adoption process. This year, through Tom Green County, we've actually had 47 children adopted, and we have several more throughout the end of this year that will continue to be adopted. And we just say that's something that's very near and dear to our heart. This is something that gives children a second chance at a forever family. We continue to say thank you to all of the kinship families and the licensed families out there that are here to serve and support the children of the community. So thank you very much.
My name is TJ Sheep-York, and I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church here in San Angelo. My wife and I have chosen to grow our family through foster care and adoption, and we have 2 young boys that we've adopted. Y'all pray for us because they're young and tough, and they're exhausting at times. I wanted to say thank you to the City Council for making this proclamation. It is a gift to be a part of a community that is so supportive of foster care. I also just want to acknowledge that often when we think about foster care, we assume the only way we can help is by opening our home. And though that is a gift to many children, there are other ways to serve. When we first moved to San Angelo, we were given a 16-year-old kid to take care of, and we were told that there were not going to be a CASA worker for him because there simply were not enough volunteers in our community to serve in this way. That was and is a tragedy. So I want to encourage those in our community to spend some time thinking about how can you step up and make a difference, to live out the words of this morning's proclamation. And it doesn't always mean opening your home to a child. There's other ways to serve. And then finally, I just want to talk about the excuse that I often hear, an excuse that I struggle with personally when it comes to foster care. We say that it's an issue of timing. When timing works out, we will step up and do what needs to be done. I would argue there's no better time than now to save the life of a child in foster care. And I hope that we as citizens of this community might take seriously today's proclamation and live out its words in our faith and action beyond this moment. Thank you.
We will now move into the public comment section of the agenda. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here today who would like to offer public comment? Seeing none, we will close the public oh, sorry, please come forward.
My name is Daryl Elliott. I been in San Angelo since 1986, and I'm a military person. 22 years in the Marine Corps, 4 in the Navy, 22 with the Air Force. Been with the military quite a bit. Now, what I'm here for is for the animal control people. I've been dealing with them for about 6 months now. And the tools they use for their job are old. The dart gun that they used in front of me, it went out and to the right. It can't hit nothing. It's old. There's no sights to it. It's falling apart, and they need a new one. And believe it or not, there are no large animal cages in San Angelo. None, zero. So one of them decided to make one. He made it out of wrought iron. It's over 200 pounds. It takes 2 people to move it. I helped move one. They only got one, and it does not work right. So they don't have the time to go around and look for cages. So I took my time and went around San Angelo and priced these things and where they can get the things they need. They need at least 3 large animal cages to catch dogs. And we have a lot of loose dogs running around San Angelo. Just look around your community. Look at them. People have been attacked. There was an elderly lady in Paulina got attacked by a pit bull. We got to do something. They're coming in packs now. Okay? If you don't do something, somebody's going to die out there. And I wouldn't want that on my conscience. I got enough on my conscience as it is. So, Tractor Supply has the cages, and they're about $129 a piece. Okay? And they're strong. And they're enough lightweight that one person can move them. Now, that's one thing. Now what they need is, what's this thing going to do if I go over? Shoot me?
That's a 2.5-minute warning, so you have 30 seconds, so continue to
Okay,
speak.
the
And I
dart
just
gun-
took up some of it, so keep on talking.
The dart gun is at Kroger's, and it's $486, and it's a good gun. It's not cheap. Don't buy anything that's cheap. So, and it doesn't.
Go ahead and finish your sentence, sir. Go ahead and finish your comment.
It doesn't come with darts. You have to buy the darts separate, okay? So, and what we need to do is get the animal control people some money to go out and buy these things. It's about $1,000 total. So, it's up to you. I got dogs running loose right now all over Paulina. So, the city council can attest to that. They come in packs.
Thank you very much.
One attacks, the other attacks. So do what you want to do. I did what I can do.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any further public comment today? So please come forward.
My name's Jacoby Thompson, in District 5 of San Angelo. I'm here, I know y'all are looking at giving Angelo State University the special exception for the alcoholic beverages at the sports games.
Could we hold this comment until we discuss the item, since it's on the agenda?
Generally, we don't have public comment on any item that's on the agenda. We wait until that agenda item comes up, and then we will have a discussion. So if you don't mind being patient, we'll have it in just a few minutes. Thank you. Any further public comment on any items not on the consent or regular agenda at this point?
Brian Thompson, I'm at 2602 Rice. I just want to thank the City Council for your proclamation as far as supporting life in San Angelo. I know it states in there that you strive to further pursue wholeheartedly the vision of being a Texas standard of opportunity, prosperity, and quality of life. I know this council has heard many times as far as the sanctity of, or San Angelo becoming a sanctuary city, and if you're going to say that you're going to wholeheartedly pursue and be a standard, then I want to encourage you to take that next step further and to make that proclamation to make San Angelo a sanctuary city for the unborn, so that there is more than just a proclamation, that there is actually some bite to what we believe and what we say. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thank you.
We've already made a decision that it will be an item that will be taken to the public for their vote on it.
I appreciate that then.
Further public comment? With that, we will close the public comment section of the agenda, and we will move into the consent agenda. Are there items that council would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? I will start with Larry. Lane? Lucy?
No, ma'am.
Harry? Tom?
No, ma'am.
Tommy? No, ma'am. With that,
Mayor, the item that the gentleman was going to speak on, the university food services exemption, that is actually item N. So I think it would be prudent to pull that.
go ahead and pull it. Item N will be pulled, and with that, I will ask for a motion to approve all items on the consent agenda with the exception of item N. It's moved by Harry, seconded by somebody, Harry, Tommy. Any public comment? At this point, please come forward with your public comment on,
Let's go ahead and.
go ahead and come forward. But we'll take a vote on, no, we don't take a vote. We have public comment first.
We'll take a vote on this and then read item
Okay,
N.
Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? Sorry, sir. Come on. Out of practice. All right, item N is consider a resolution to grant university food services on behalf of Angelo State University a variance from Article 5.02.033 of the City Code of Ordinances to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages, beer and wine at 2235 South Jackson Street, a property within 300 feet of a public school. Would you like to make public comment?
As I said, my name's Jacoby Thompson from District 5 of the City Council. I come before y'all today as y'all look at this exception for ASU. I would strongly ask that y'all would, I'm personally a student there right now, ask that y'all would consider not passing that exception for them because to me, I've already seen at least one fight at a football game between two men that were already at least partially drunk, and ASU has already been selling alcohol at their football games this year. We were told that they were allowed to sell alcohol at the football games and have gone back and looked. They have never been approved to sell alcohol at the football games that we can find. So I ask y'all that y'all would consider rejecting this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Kimberly Thompson from District 5. And in regard to giving Angelo State University an exemption so that they can have the ability to sell alcohol on campus, I know that the reason that they were declined is because they're within 300 feet of an elementary school. But if you consider the boundaries of that property, not only are they 300 feet from an elementary school, there is also a middle school. And I know that the way the law is set up, that the measurements go front door to front door, but consider its other boundaries. Not one, not two, but 3 churches. To the best of my knowledge, 2 of those churches provide childcare in their facilities through Mother's Day Out programs or preschool programs. Not only that, the campus is surrounded by 3 medical facilities, one of which would offer long-term care type services. So when you consider the location of where that license is going to be and what surrounds it, even if some of that maybe goes beyond what the letter of the law says, I just recommend that they not be allowed to sell alcohol there. When you consider the residents that live around there, the residents that are there are the university students. And most of the ones that live on the campus are minors. Our students need to see that they can go to football games and other sporting events and have a good and enjoyable time without having to add alcohol to the mix. In fact, our students are asked to watch videos as an incoming ASU student that speak to them about the dangers of drinking and underage drinking. Yet by allowing Angelo State University to have alcoholic beverage sales on campus, we're presenting a contradictory picture before them and setting that temptation before them, even though the school addresses the issue of problems of underage drinking. Regarding that, we just don't need to set that before them, and we ask that the city not grant that to them. And it's already in question of why they're already selling alcohol there anyways. So we ask that you not grant that to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Yes, sir.
We do have a representative from the university. I wonder if they'd like to come to the microphone.
Well, I've been opening it up for public comment. I'm assuming that they don't, else they'd be up here at the podium. Good morning.
I'm the Director of Dining Services for Angelo State University. We do have a liquor permit granted by TABC to do a temporary venue of beer and wine sales at this point in time, and so we are complicit with the laws for TABC selling beer and wine at this point in time. And so I just wanted to let you know that we're not selling it illegally or without anybody's knowledge. ASU does know that we're selling this, and TABC does as well.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Joe Munoz, single member District Number 1, I believe, and here on behalf of Angelo State University. We do sell alcohol currently at the football stadium, but we stopped selling alcohol like within the last 5 minutes of the third quarter, so we don't sell it through the fourth quarter. We don't sell alcohol at the Ram Jam. We do have a Ram Jam. Alcohol is allowed, but it has a lot of security there. If there are problems, and the University Police are there to stop any type of problems that we have. We haven't had very many problems at all at the Ram Jam. The alcohol that we're asking to be approved today will be sold in the Janelle Center, which is indoors. And it's only going, and we monitor it very carefully. The folks from the Chartwells, they are trained. They do know when to stop selling alcohol to someone who may have a problem with it or may have drank too much alcohol. But we haven't had as many problems at all with it. I don't know, if what those comments earlier were made, but they certainly weren't made within the football stadium where the alcohol is sold. It might have been at the Ram Jam or something like that, but it's not inside. So we're asking that you approve our ability to sell alcohol at the Janelle Center. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Lucy?
Yeah, Joe, so what time do these events start and end?
It's going to be during basketball games, probably volleyball games, probably in the evening.
They be during the week or during the weekend?
They're all, sometimes they have games during the week also. Weekends, during the week, it's just whenever they're scheduled.
Thank you.
Further question, Larry?
You're asking for permission to sell alcohol sales at the Janelle Center.
Yes, sir.
Did the university come to us when they began selling at the sporting events? And if not, why not?
Did the university go?
Well, number one is because, as they stated, they had a temporary license from TABC to start selling it before the final vote on the alcohol license. So once they rejected it, then they stopped. But they had the right to do it because TABC gave them a temporary license. Any further questions for Joe? All right, with none, thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much.
We did this a little upside down, but, John, you want to come forward?
Well, just if you have any questions, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. I did want to make one point. Under our ordinance, we measure property line to property line, and so that's what puts them within 300 feet of both Crockett Elementary and Glenn Middle School. However, if we were to measure door to door, then they're well over the 300 feet. And so the buildings are more than 300 feet from the school buildings. It's just property line to property line they actually touch and are adjacent.
Thank you. Any questions for John? Thank you. Then may I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Lane, a second
Second.
by somebody?
Tom.
Harry. With that, we already did public comment, but if anybody else wants to come forward on public comment, this would be your opportunity to do so. With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Tom, did you say aye? Okay.
I said aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 7-0. That concludes the consent agenda for today. We will move into the regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are accepted from the time limit above and must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. We will start with item A. Consider a resolution allowing the adjacent property owner to remove a tree in the public right-of-way adjacent to 17 West Boulevard Avenue per section 7.02.034 of the City Code of Ordinances. John, you're on.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is a request. Our city ordinance does require city council approval to remove trees in the public right-of-way in the downtown. You can see the location here on Beauregard. Just a couple of pictures of the site. You can see the tree in the foreground of this picture here, and it does, you can see it pretty substantially blocks the front view of that building. I'll note that as you're coming to that site from the sides, there is some more visibility. It's really straight on that it is the worst visibility problem. We have recommended to the applicant to consider trimming up the tree to give a little more visibility to the site, but I think she is here to address some of the concerns that she has with that. Just a few of the pictures that she submitted showing that the sidewalk is in need of a little repair, and that some of that could be caused by the tree roots of that tree. Just a drawing from the applicant of what it would look like after the removal. And some of her reasons she provided in her letter to you all asking for removal, the sidewalk damage, cracked sidewalk. It does block the view, and the applicant is willing to plant a new tree either in that location or another location. As you see in the resolution, we've recommended some options. If you choose to approve this, options for including some landscaping, so maybe keeping that planter box in front, even if the tree is removed, or reconstructing it, planting some flowers, a new tree, some shrubs or something that would still provide some landscaping, but not be blocking the view of that building as much as the tree would. Staff is recommending denial based on our adopted plans for the downtown, the encouragement of streetscaping and aesthetics in the downtown, and given that this is we believe, over a 50-year-old tree, we were just very hesitant to remove a tree of that substance anywhere in the downtown, really. So I think I'd be happy to answer your questions at that point if you have any.
Harry?
Yeah, I've taken a look at this. This is downtown, so it's in my district. I'd like to make sure that we do something to help this applicant out on this. That tree really, it's a mature tree, and I'm very much against typically taking these types of trees out. But it's doing some work on that sidewalk right now, which ultimately is going to put a hazard in either for the city or for the applicant, because people are going to trip on that thing. So I need to figure out if there's a way that we can make this work, both for the city and the applicant. And quite honestly, I think that tree is really too big for that particular area right now. And I'd like to find a way that we can make this work for the applicant.
It is well known that trees and landscaping are huge economic development tools, and we have a standard for making sure that trees remain in our historic downtown. We're getting ready to plant a whole bunch of them on Chadburn. So I hate to say, okay, so if you're on Boulevard, you don't have to have a tree, but we're going to plant and invest money on Chadburn. So I have a hesitancy on the issue of removing a tree. The question mark is the following. You can repair the sidewalk, but is there not a problem with the adjacent property also with a sidewalk issue? And if it's not going to be repaired and that adjacent tree is there. 'Cause we're talking about one storefront, not the two storefronts that would seem to be in this conversation. Number two, I would ask that the planter box, if it is moved, if the tree is taken down, which I don't support, that a nice sized tree is put back up. There's a reason why trees are planted. And one of them is because if you're in downtown anywhere in San Angelo in July, it's 110 degrees, it's hot, and everyone's looking for shade. So you have to have some options for shade. So we can't be planting, or should not be planting, small little trees that don't provide, it's number one, aesthetically good, but number two, providing shade. Lucy?
I just want to make a statement. When the freeze came, we lost a lot of trees all over town. So I'm saying leave the ones that lived alone.
Further comment?
I'm in favor of repairing if we can and leave this. Has the applicant looked at the routes, sorry, John, for taking out the root that's exposing?
I would defer to the applicant on that. I know she's had some tree folks look at it, and so I think she'd better be able to answer that.
Michelle, you want to come forward? Good morning.
So, when we first came to the city, I own Old Central Firehouse, you guys just took a huge chance on us, not knowing us from anyone. So I'm just asking, I know taking out a tree is a huge ask. I know you all know too, like we do our homework, probably obsessively, like overly do our homework, but there's a lot of reasons why I really feel that for what we want to do. Now, if the building continues to sit empty, then obviously it doesn't matter. For the business that we're planning, the storefront is huge, so it's very important. The sidewalk right now, as it sits, I personally know of 2 people who have been injured because of the sidewalk. So it's a huge, huge concern. There's no way you could wheel a wheelchair over that sidewalk. Even a stroller is a problem. So the sidewalk is a problem. I have talked to tree experts. There's no real solution. There's a temporary solution if they, but they don't know once they dig up that concrete, which we have to replace the sidewalk no matter what. That's, if you have a business there, it's not an option. So digging that up, you're digging up roots, you're either cutting roots off, shaving roots, and so it is going to put the tree at some sort of jeopardy. The planter box, I don't want to leave. The firemen next door clean the planter box, and it's not only used for a bed and a garbage, but also a toilet. And so I just find huge safety concerns just public-wise with that. So we are proposing, you saw the picture that Henry did, it's beautiful. We are proposing that we take that tree out to have a beautiful storefront, but also replace it with, I'd like to replace it with a couple different trees and some greenery, obviously on a smaller level than what's there now. But I have done my homework. I've done my homework as far as talking to tree experts. We just found out there's actually some electrical wires running through that tree, which is also causing safety concerns. So that just landed on my lap yesterday, just hearing from somebody that I didn't realize prior to yesterday. So that's another huge issue and concern with the tree being there. So like I said, I know trees are important. I also know that our downtown is important and the economic growth. And our downtown is the heart of the city. So just putting a new business, what we have planned, I feel is it's so beneficial to downtown. And so I'm just asking that you guys just trust me and put your faith in me and let me do this. And I promise to do my best to have another successful business downtown.
Any questions for Michelle?
Michelle, what type of tree did you look at replacing with potentially?
So I have not got to that stage because, well, I haven't. So the couple people I've talked to about trees did say there are trees that actually, where the roots grow down and not out. And so both people I talked to suggested that's probably the best sort of tree because, again, otherwise in another 30, 50 years, you're going to have these same problems.
And that's the answer that I was kind of looking for on that. Was this a live oak that I was seeing a picture of?
I believe it is a live oak, yes.
Those have roots that go both down and out.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be in favor of finding a solution in a tree that has more downward, more red oak. They have.
We are planting trees on Chadbourne Avenue. I would strongly suggest that a tree similar to any of the trees planting on Chadbourne, because we don't need different trees on different blocks.
What are those?
So, John.
There's a
Rick.
list of options. They're more smaller treescape or streetscape trees, so Chinese pistache, things that stay a little bit smaller. They make a canopy but don't get as humongous as a live oak.
Well, if we could be in favor of removing this and replacing with compatible with what we're doing on the
You could
Chadbourne.
provide a list of those that we're using there.
And we need to talk about the size of tree. So the same thing, what size of trees are we planting on Chadbourne?
You're asking what size they are?
Mhm.
They're a smaller tree, streetscape tree, so not a massive live oak or a pecan, so they're more like a
Yes,
Chinese
but when we
pistache.
plant it, are we planting a tree that is 3 feet tall, one that's 5 feet tall, one that's 6
I'd have to
feet
look at
tall?
the specs, but they're not teeny tiny trees. They're bigger, so we could give the specs on that as well.
They grow to grow to.
Grow to the size of a Chinese pistache, which
Okay.
is a smaller streetscape tree, not a massive oak tree. And then the size of the planting of the tree is not a teeny tiny tree. We're doing larger containerized ones, and we can get the specs on those from Shane as well.
With it being paved around and planter box around, it's always going to be a problem as that tree continues to grow. I believe if it's a live oak.
We're not replanting live oaks, okay? Again, we're talking about the trees
No,
we're
I was
planting
just
on
saying that
Chadbourne.
If she
So,
leaves this, it's only going to get worse.
so are you asking questions or are you making a motion?
No, I was just making a statement at that.
Okay. Are there additional questions for Michelle? With no additional questions for Michelle, do we have a motion?
Motion that we allow the applicant to remove the tree, but replace it with a city-specified tree of a certain height.
And we're going to redo the brickwork around the tree.
And we probably somebody needs to do the sidewalk.
The sidewalk has to be redone. So what your motion is that the sidewalk will be improved, the tree will come down, we will plant a like tree as the trees planted on Chadbourne, and we will replace the red brick planter box around that new tree.
Can I just make a comment? You know, I'm all about the way things look. So we'll do all of that, but do I need to commit to a red brick planter box in front?
The motion. Is there a second on that motion?
Are you planning on
There's
doing?
a motion on the floor, either a second, we'll take a vote, or you can change the motion. You can't change the motion that's on the floor at this point. We can deny the motion on the floor, but we've got to take a vote before we can change the motion.
Can I just say, like you are on Chadbourne, that open in the cement, there, you can tell that there's open spots where you're going to place the trees. That's what I would like to do again, so I'm just not covering up the facade that's there in the likes of what Henry did. Just plant it in the ground, in the concrete, like you are on Chadbourne.
The motion, we can vote and then deny it and then make a new motion. Okay. Is there a second on the motion? With no second on the motion, we will go back and revise the motion. That motion would be what?
I would keep it the same except for changing the planter box to be compatible with whatever facade work you are doing to the building, compatible to that. That's the question I was going to ask. Are you changing the facade of the building? So that was where the red brick, being specific to red brick, might not be,
Correct.
might be more of a,
Is it a stucco building, Michelle?
No, I mean, the front is small, so it's mostly that glass and that rock there. So we want to, change it up to make it more look, I don't know, more classic and just, when you're driving by,
Here
it'll
we are
make you
trying
want
to
stop.
prove it, and we can't leave it
Yes.
open-ended without knowing exactly what's going to be done. So it has to be specific in terms of what's going to be
So
done.
back to Henry's picture, I think what makes sense in this is either planter boxes in front on the left and the right, housing two different trees, or in the front where the planter box currently is, leaving the concrete open so we can plant a tree and possibly some greenery around it.
So what we're asking is that the existing tree be removed, sidewalk be repaired. Are we going to, because we're looking at this for an approval. Okay, so if this is what we're looking at for approval, we don't have something different to look at for approval. So the question mark is, are we planting one tree with the open space as in Chadburn? Are we planting two trees with two different openings as on Chadburn? Because this is what we have to approve this, so you have to tell us what it is.
What might be consistent with Chadburn is to do what you're saying with the flat, you leave a space and we can work with you on those sizes, where you do some plantings around that. And then if you do the two trees sort of flanking the smaller streetscape trees that are on the same list as Chadburn, I think that would be consistent with what's going on and what might be consistent in the future with what happens on this. So I think that's where I would head.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
okay. There is a motion, is there a second? Second. There's a second by Harry. Any public comment?
Good morning, Council. My name is Del Velasquez. I'm the Executive Director for Downtown San Angelo, and I'm working with Michelle on this project to try to make both work for everyone in relationship to recreating what we can in terms of developing the landscaping, but as well getting a business that's going to produce tax income for the city and help with the revitalization of downtown San Angelo. It's kind of a stuck-in-the-middle situation for us because we do promote and want trees to be part of our downtown district. And so, but at the same time, understand that we can work with her to make this possible. And I think the recommendation that just was made by Rick is something that we should adopt and move forward with. Thank you. Or do you have any questions of me?
No. So just to repeat, what we are saying is that the landscaping must mirror what's happening on Chadburn. Tree size, holes, openings, so that it matches what is being done on Chadburn.
I think that creates that aesthetics that we're looking for. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that there's two.
And there's two of them, not one.
And just additional comment, I personally experienced a friend of mine, 90-year-old woman, who fell right at that very step, right at that location, and broke her hip. And so it is, that sidewalk is horrible, needs to be done.
The question, okay, and thank you, Dale. So the question mark is, and Michelle's going to take care of her problems in front of her building, so we know that that's taken care of. But from what I understand, and this is for a separate conversation, is that the building next to it has the same problem. That being said.
I'm going to say that's actually, the other tree is actually more problematic because the concrete is actually protruding a little bit higher. I went out there and took photos as well. So it's a separate issue, but we'll have to address it as a city as well, how we're going to handle that. But that is correct. That's going to be corrected.
Mayor?
Yes, Tommy.
That entire sidewalk has places literally from Irving Street back to Chadburn Street there. So if we're going to look at that, let's look at the whole sidewalk that way.
Knowing that the business owners are responsible for repairing that, so, all right, with that, enough, because that's something else. Sorry.
Could I ask one question?
Yes.
We're going to vote on this, but this still has to go through DHRC on your plans. there any chance
Well, the DA
that that's
yeah.
going to change what we're
Well, that's the
and then
reason.
coming back to us?
That's the reason I said we needed to have a diagram that reflected what she was going to do, because that's what DHRC is going to require. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my name's Kimberly Thompson, and I'm listening to your discussion on this, and I heard most of the council say that beginning, many were opposed to removing trees and things like that, and then making it okay because we're going to replace it with another tree. But there's obviously sidewalk problems, not only with this property, but as y'all have addressed up and down that street that apparently need to be looked into. But the lady is asking for the tree to be removed so that we can have sight of the property so that the business can be seen. How is it that we remove a tree that's taller and broader at top, replace it with two smaller trees that are going to grow lower? Aren't they going to block it even more in the end? And we're going to lose an immense amount of shade because it's going to take a long time for these other trees to grow back. But it seems to me that the presentation is there's sidewalk issues. They need to be addressed. But there's an issue of seeing the storefront. But by taking out one tree, planting two that are going to be shorter and smaller, we're not solving that issue of that storefront being seen ultimately.
That's one of the reasons why we brought up that this diagram is not reflective of what's going to be done, because if this tree that's being replanted is reflective on the left side of the building, where's the other one going to go? And again, we're trying to approve something we don't visually see in this diagram. So and we need to approve what we're going to have executed.
Well, I hear her point. So probably the biggest thing is when you see this storefront, for me, what pops out is the awning. It makes me want to go into this store. So the way the tree is that currently is there, it is growing up against the building. So whether this is an awning or a sign or anything, there's no way that you're going to be able to see that. The next door neighbors have a sign that come out from their building this way rather than on their building. Still not something that we could do because the tree is so close. So having two smaller trees on either side is still going to leave the front of the building open. It's still going to leave room for the awning that is really going to capture people's attention, I believe. So I don't think that is going to be an issue. It's just that this tree, the trunk is huge, but then there's bigger limbs. I don't even call them limbs. They're huge. They're so big, even trimming the trees. That's why the tree guys I had come out, they're like, the leaves are just a very small issue of that, causing you not to see that. It's the huge, branches or leaves or whatever that are extended of that. So.
Mayor, I have a
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Have you closed on that property yet?
We are set to close in the next 7 to 14 days.
Okay.
Yes. And we have permission from the owners to talk
I'm
about.
assuming you won't remove the tree until after you close. Is that correct?
Oh, correct.
Okay.
Yes. No, I mean, it'll be a process again, that there's, with those electric wires running through it, it's going to be the electric company's got to get involved in all that. So it's going to be it's going to be a little while.
We just want to make sure that the resolution reflects the action that's actually being taken.
I think the right thing to do today is to say that council is obviously in support of removing that tree and improving the sidewalk. But in fact, our final approval should be with an actual sketch of what's going to look like.
Okay.
So I think what we should vote on today is, quote, allowing you to, when you close, if you close, on the property, to have the tree removed, because I know that's important for you to understand before you choose to close. But what we do need for final approval is a sketch brought back for our approval on it. So yes to removing of a tree, but no to any conversation about it till we see a visual of what it's going to be like.
Okay.
So that we're clear, because you will have to have that when you go to the DHRC. So we as a council shouldn't be approving something we don't know what it looks like. So we would support removing the tree, but we must approve the final sketch of what the project will look like.
Okay.
Does that make sense to council?
She had to repair the sidewalk before she could plant new trees though, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the sidewalk is going to be improved. Yes.
This can pass, but I'm still against removing the tree.
All right. The motion on the floor is what? Because we're going to have to take a vote on the motion on the floor. Or there might not be a second, but I think we had a second on that.
Current motion on the floor is to remove the tree, replace with a city-specified tree of approved height, repair the sidewalk, and make the planter box compatible with the building facade. And then further discussion was to have the two trees flanking the open area to mirror what's happening on Chadbourne. So that's the current motion.
All right, there wasn't a second on that.
There
So
was
what I
not.
think we
Harry
need to do.
seconded.
You second, not on that one, you did you did
Lane's
on
made the
Lane's, not
motion,
on
I
that
second.
one. Okay.
Do I need to add the wording in there about the planter box?
Do we not need to
Just-
vote on it as spoken and then bring a new motion to the table? So all in favor, say aye
Wait, whoa.
What are we saying right to?
to what she just
Okay, so
read.
we need, if we're going to change it, we need to deny this and make a new motion.
That's the point.
Okay, so,
Yes.
no, nay.
The question is, all in favor, say aye. With no one in favor, motion is denied. Now we will take a new motion on the floor.
The motion, or Harry, do you want to make it? It's your district.
First of all, we're going to, two things we've just discussed. One is we, generally speaking, although there is an opposition to removing the tree, but that we can't make a final decision on this until we see a new sketch of what it's going to look like.
With that, I make the motion to approve the removal of the tree with final decision being made at a later date relative to DHRC's decision.
Do we need to talk about the sidewalk now, since she can't plant a tree until the sidewalk is repaired?
We're going to have a new sketch brought back so we can approve the final look at it, and the final project will include removing a tree, improving the sidewalk, and planting new trees, but we will not make a final decision on approving
Yes. That's my
until
motion.
we have a new sketch reflecting what the candidate chooses to design, to have designed for final approval.
That is
And
my
there will
motion.
be a written resolution that addresses that, so we'll make the removal of the tree contingent on her receiving permission from you of an approved design. So at that time, we can do the sidewalk and all of that. So you would need to bring that back before the tree is actually removed, which I'm assuming you would do anyway.
Second Lane's motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
One. So motion passes 6-1, but it's only conditional on something coming back and taking a final vote on that something coming back. The first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z21-12, a rezoning from the neighborhood commercial to the general commercial zoning district being approximately .209 acres located at 3017 Southwest Boulevard.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is the property here in red that you see just adjacent to the Tom Clock Plus and that large shopping center there. It's a strip here of a number of smaller commercial properties, and you can see on the zoning that the large shopping center is currently zoned general commercial, but that strip of smaller buildings is all zoned neighborhood commercial. This would change that one property on the end to general commercial, which would be the same as to the north and the west of the property. We did send our notices to the surrounding properties, did not receive any in support or in opposition. Just a couple of pictures. This change is consistent with the future land use plan. It's compatible with the surrounding areas, so staff is recommending approval. The Planning Commission also unanimously recommended approval.
Is the applicant wanting to change the business in that building?
I believe that the need for the change relates to an alcohol permit that the neighborhood commercial district does not allow, but the general commercial does. The applicant may be able to give more information on that if they're here.
When you say no opposition to it, is that because people realize that it's going to sell alcohol now, or were they aware of that when the notice was sent out for changing of the?
No, that's not something we typically send out with a zoning notice. In fact, in many cases, we don't know the reason an applicant is requesting a rezoning, so we just send out the notice that it's zoning from one district to another, and that's the only information we send out.
Do we have questions for John? Larry, it's in your district, I think. Do you have any questions on this issue? No questions? Do we have a motion? Would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve, as
Thank
presented.
you, Tommy. Second by
Second.
Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, wait, there might be a public comment. Come on up. Come on down.
Jenkins, and I'm with the applicant, Soto Management, and it is just for, we already sell alcohol there, but this is just for daiquiris that are wine-based to go, like Eskimo Hut and our other store on Chadburn. So that is just the whole reason why. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. There's a motion and a second. We've opened it up for public comment. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to item C. Consider the following. Ratifying the Development Corporation's resolution approving a project under Chapter 501 and 505 of the Texas Local Government Code utilizing sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $3 million to fund improvements to airport facilities, including the GTE hangar, pursuant to a public-private partnership agreement with Skyline Aviation Incorporated, and authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute all related documents, and further authorizing the following in conjunction with the project. A, appointing the Director of Economic Development or their designee to act as a development corporation's authorized representative under the public-private partnership agreement with Skyline Aviation Incorporated, and B, authorizing COSA DC Board President to negotiate and execute a lease agreement between the Development Corporation and the City of San Angelo for lease of the property located at 8534 Hangar Road, and C, pursuant to Section 505.1561 of the Texas Local Government Code, authorizing COSA DC Board President to negotiate and execute a lease agreement between the Development Corporation and Skyline Aviation Incorporated for sublease of the property located at 8534 Hangar Road, and 2, authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a lease agreement between the Development Corporation and the City of San Angelo for lease of the property located at 8534 Hangar Road. And Guy, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. Guy Andrews, Director of Economic Development for the City of San Angelo Development Corporation. You would be highly disappointed, I know, if I didn't repeat our mantra for economic development, which is planes, trains, and automobiles. And I'm happy to report this morning that we're proceeding very well in the area of the automobiles with the moving forward of 2 interstate highways for the future of San Angelo, Interstate 27 and I-14, and a lot of that's owed to our Mayor Brent Gunter, so thank you for that. We're also on our railport. We anticipated in that public-private partnership we formed to develop a 183-acre railport, about 6 years to develop that. I'm happy to report that the track is down, and that will be open by the end of this month. So in just about a year's time, we've been able to do that through the public-private partnership. Moving on to planes, our focus now is on the airport, and it's about developing the airport into what we would consider a world-class airport. You'll recall that a couple of years ago, there was a master plan that was done for the airport, very comprehensive. One of the items that's always been an issue at the airport, of course, is the GTE, or it's sometimes referred to as the Mitsubishi hangar, which is one of the largest World War II era hangars on the property. The question is, should that hangar be torn down? Can it be improved and all of that? So you'll also recall that we commissioned a study with an architect that was very familiar with all the FAA rulings and everything, and determined that there could be something done with that hangar. And so I'm happy to announce that we're recommending a project that would utilize that hangar and make improvements for the airport and for improving our revenues at the airport. This is an overview of the proposed project. It would be a public-private partnership between City of San Angelo Development Corporation and Skyline Aviation. The total financial commitment for the Development Corporation is not to exceed $3 million. And this is authorized under the Texas Local Government Code. These are the project deliverables for this project. We would rehabilitate, reskin the GTE hangar. We would rehabilitate the commercial apron that's shown to the left of the building. We would construct new rental car parking, construct new general use parking, and construct adjoining office and conference space. In this project, with Skyline Aviation, they would serve as the construction manager at risk. It's also called CMAR. Skyline would ensure completion of all project deliverables with a guaranteed maximum financial commitment by the Development Corporation of $3 million. The construction manager at risk is financially liable for any cost overrun or contingencies that arise throughout the projects. The Development Corporation will serve as the owner of the project, maintaining oversight and approval authority. Our board of directors would appoint an authorized representative to execute project documents. The authorized representative would liaise with Skyline's construction manager to review and approve project documents, all of our agreements, change orders, payment applications in an efficient manner. And then the city serves as an advisory capacity, providing technical expertise and requisite access to the project manager. The city's airport director will advise the Development Corporation authorized representative and Skyline's construction manager and participate in the review and approval process for project documents. So while this is being constructed by a private entity, which makes this project go much faster, it will have oversight at every step of the way, and there will be certain timelines that are set to when we're able to release funds for this project. The statutory requirements, this is from our local government code, that it does allow us to make improvements, including the airport hangars, allows us to enter into a development agreement with the entity, and it authorizes the development agreement by adopting a resolution at a meeting called authorized by law. The Development Corporation is required to have a leasehold interest in this. So per the statute, the Development Corporation must acquire leasehold interest for the GT hangar from the City of San Angelo. That's the agreement that would be negotiated with the city manager. The Development Corporation would then sublease the hangar to Skyline Aviation. The City of San Angelo would retain ownership of the hangar and 100% of the lease revenue. And per statute, Skyline Aviation would be authorized to sublease their interest for other eligible projects. These are some concept drawings that have been provided in regard to this project. First of all, you'll see it'll be known as the San Angelo Jet Center. You see at the top of that page the parking lots to be improved, and then a concept drawing of what the improvement would be to the front of that hangar. And by the way, the Skyline Aviation, just for clarification, is investing several $1 million into this project and have already invested substantial amounts of money in moving this project forward. These are additional renderings provided to us that shows what that fixed base operation would look like on the front of the hangar, and then some concept drawings of the interior and how that's laid out. This is a ground level view from the runway looking towards Skyline Aviation. So our staff recommendation is exactly what the mayor read, so I won't belabor that and read it all over again. It would be exactly that motion, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Does anyone have questions for Guy at this point? Guy, the one question I have is timeline for completion. So we talk about the work that's going to happen, but when would we see beginning and ending?
With this motion today would authorize the project for expenditures up to $3 million. It would also allow us to negotiate all the details with Skyline Aviation and basically have a contract and agreement about how all of that's laid out. Highly complex agreement in a public-private partnership, but I'm just going to take a second at this time to acknowledge the work that went into it by the staff. Nolan Sosa that brought a lot of knowledge about procurement and projects to that, and Bob Schneeman of our staff will be the project manager or overseer on this to liaise. The Skyline anticipates that they could have this done as early, begin construction as early as January. The hangar itself is currently leased month to month, basically for storage of aircraft, because that's all you can do with that facility at this time. And so we could begin construction as early as January of 2022.
Further questions? If not, may I have a motion?
Mayor, I would move to approve.
I second.
Second by Lucy. Public comment, please.
Susie Smith. I live just off College Hills, and I understand this is supposed to be part of preserving historic building. At least that's what I was understanding that
What
part
it
of
is
it was.
in the process, it will be using the existing facility, which happens to be historic, but the intent is not to do it simply for historic preservation. It is to utilize a building that would cost a lot to tear down and rebuild a new facility, so the best thing is to revamp the existing facility, but it is not for historic purposes. It's for the best dollar investment in an existing facility.
Because I was going to say it doesn't look like it's preserving much of the historic.
Thank you. Any further public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 With none opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Item D, presentation of the master drainage plan findings by HDR Engineering and possible direction. Presentation made by Public Works Executive Director Shane Kelton and HDR Engineering Program Manager Curtis Bytel?
Beetle.
Beetle.
Battle. Okay. Mayor, Council, thank you all for entertaining us this morning. This has been a long time coming. We actually started this project back in the summer of 2020, and as you know, our master drainage plan that we have currently was done and completed in 2000, the original one, and so after 20 years, we have seen a lot of growth in San Angelo and seen a lot of issues shift and change over time, and we've been able to address one or two off the old list. And so working forward, we've engaged EHT and HDR Engineering to work with us to update our master drainage plan and to look at the issues that we've seen with all of the growth in San Angelo and kind of what to expect as we look into the future and as we continue to grow. So with that, I'm going to let Curtis come up here and make his presentation of their findings and what we found through this study that they've conducted for the master drainage plan. And once we get through, We will kind of get y'all's questions and comments and take those down, and we will come back and we'll finalize the document and bring it back to you at a later date for adoption. But we want to show you their findings and get answer any questions and get your comments. So with that,
My
I'll turn
first
it.
comment and question would be, are we going to focus on College Hills first and foremost? Thank you.
That was the first thing we asked them to work on. So.
Opportunity to present to you today, Mayor and Council. And my name's Curtis Beidle with HDR Engineering out of Fort Worth. I also have Joe Mangrum with Improtech Hibbs and Todd, who was our subconsultant on the project with us this morning as well. So, let's see. So as Shane mentioned, we approached the Master Drainage Plan update in two parts because of the urgency of the design of College Hills Boulevard and really needing to know, will upstream detention be able to reduce the flooding of College Hills Boulevard to factor that into the design? We needed that answer by September of 2019. So that was the first part of our effort that we did. The second part was to step back and evaluate the drainage problem areas across the rest of the city and prioritize those drainage problem areas and then develop CIP projects to address the top 10 problem areas. In terms of the Red Arroyo plan, as you can see just from the graphic, a lot of that watershed is already heavily urbanized and developed. So we went through and identified the opportunities of large open areas that are still available. We identified 3 on the North Fork of the Red Arroyo and 3 on the South Fork of the Red Arroyo to evaluate further. We did conceptual designs of those regional detention facilities and did a hydrologic model to route the flows down to College Hills Boulevard and determine the benefit of those. Then we took the benefit and divided by the cost to get kind of a dollar per CFS reduction. And as through that analysis, we identified that site N2, which is located behind the current Angelo State University Sports Complex, was the most cost-effective at reducing flows down at College Hills Boulevard, but it did not have a really significant benefit to the roadway. The green location here is an area that the city of San Angelo already owns, which is a little bit closer on the North Fork. That was also a very beneficial location. As we kept looking at College Hills Boulevard, one of the interesting things is the North Fork is actually a little bit higher than the South Fork. So when flow overtops the North Fork crossing, it actually flows along College Hills down to the South Fork and aggravates that situation. We identified an opportunity that if you put a berm kind of along the upstream side of College Hills Boulevard, the bridge actually, or the crossing actually increases. So trying to cut off that flow that comes across College Hills Boulevard, we can actually provide a 5-year protection with a 2-foot-high berm that could also have, a concrete walkway on the top of that connects to the trail. So it would look almost like it was there for the trail, but it would really be there to provide that.
When we have big rains, I would say the find that it's so aggressive, the flooding on College Hills, I'm shocked that a 2-foot berm would solve the problem. You would assume that it would take more than that.
It won't solve the entire problem because that's a pretty intractable problem, but it will reduce that overflow, so it can make it a little bit better, and that berm's already been included in the final plan.
But if there's overflow, then I would also assume that if you, quote, said there was a walking trail on top of it, it would be destroying that if it flows over it.
Well, the walking trail is kind of what stabilizes the top of the berm, rather than just being.
How often, is this a 10-year floodplain problem that we're dealing with? Is it 20-year? what are we solving by 2-foot berm with a walking trail on top?
We're basically increasing because right now it overtops at a 1 year, multiple times a year. This would allow it to not overtop for anything that would have like a 20% chance of occurring in any given year.
So the rains, for example, that we've had over the past 2 years, how often would those rains have gone over this 2-foot berm?
Almost all of them would go over it now without the berm.
Well, I know that.
Yeah.
I'm asking,
Yeah.
with the berm up there, based off of the rainfalls that we've had over the past 2 years, which have been significant compared to traditional rainfall,
Yes.
would this 2-foot berm,
I think several of the events that we've had in the past few years would not have overtopped and gone down and aggravated.
okay,
Some of those were larger, as you've said, and when you get up to over a 10-year frequency, it will overtop a little bit. It would overtop less during those events. So it's really to address the more frequent events that happen along College Hills as a way of benefiting that. And as I mentioned, we were able to include that in the College Hills Boulevard plans. So it was a very cost-effective improvement as well. So then taking a step back and looking at the rest of the city, this graphic, I know it's a little hard to see, but the point would be just kind of the distribution of the problem locations throughout San Angelo. This is the city north of the Concho River. We started off with the locations that were in the master drainage plan in 2000. I worked on that plan, and I'm actually the person who sealed the report for that. So had a lot of.
did you give yourself an A on that one, or what would you grade yourself?
It's still very applicable. The challenge is really on the funding side because the projects are fairly expensive, and there was no real identified funding source, which is kind of the reason why only a couple of the projects have been able to be addressed over the past 20 years. There is a lot of good news in that that I'll share here in a little bit in the presentation. City operations staff also added a couple more locations as well. A lot of them, those tended to be more in the southern area of the city, which has seen a lot of growth. So, but the problem areas are pretty well distributed throughout San Angelo. In terms of prioritizing the problem areas, we really base that on the data that's available at those locations. So we focused on the property damage, or preventing property damage, which is the structural flooding category. We looked at the number of residences and the number of businesses and industries that would be flooded, and awarded more points for larger numbers of those structures that are impacted. In terms of loss of life, a lot of that is related to the low water crossing flooding and roadway inundation. So we awarded points for the event that crossing could pass, and then also just the busyness of the roadway in terms of the average daily traffic count numbers, which are available throughout the city as well. We had a third category, which was if there was a existing street reconstruction already planned in that area, to try to coordinate these improvements with the street construction improvements. We also looked at the economic aspect of each project in terms of the percent grant that might be available through the Water Development Board, as well as the public survey responses. In terms of the public survey, we initially were planning on having a drainage town hall meeting, but then the pandemic happened, and that delayed us quite a bit. We decided rather than a public meeting for the drainage town hall that we would do a public input website. And so we developed the input website, had that open for 4 weeks in January and February of this year, and it was really quite successful. I mean, it received new public comments every day that it was open, and really was able to give us some additional input, probably more input than we would have received at the drainage town hall meeting process. So with that, we were able to continue. In terms of the summary of the input that we received, one of the questions was, what floods? And the majority of those responses certainly were the streets, as y'all would expect. There were a couple that were backyard flooding, which could relate more to some of the channels in town. And some of the front yard flooding also relates to the streets getting out of the right-of-way. The good news was there wasn't that many responses where my home flooded. There were 5 of those. But there is some significant flooding that has happened in San Angelo. We also asked how long have they lived in San Angelo, because if they've only moved here in one or 2 years, then they may not have experienced the flooding that some of the longtime residents did. And really, we had some great response. The average response that they've lived in San Angelo for over 30 years, so and all the way up to 65 years. So these are some of the comments that we received, and we were able to incorporate those into the plan. As I mentioned, the opportunity that was not there in 2000 that is there today is the Flood Infrastructure Fund that's been established with the Texas Water Development Board. Back in the 2019 legislature, they approved the state flood planning process, and they established this Flood Infrastructure Fund. They took $4 billion out of the rainy day fund to establish that.
I think it all went to Houston.
About half of that did go to Houston to support all of the Harvey rebuilding and whatnot. But a good portion of that has been set aside to fund the projects in the state flood plan with a pattern similar to the state water plan. So they are developing the first ever state flood plan, which is going to be approved by or adopted by the legislature in 2024. After that point, the project would have to be in that flood plan to receive funding from the Flood Infrastructure Fund. So they didn't want to wait until 2024 to start doing projects. So they did come out with an abridged applications process in June of last year. And the interesting thing about that abridged application process was they had a % grant equation and criteria, with grant being basically principal forgiveness on the loan. And it was really focused on a couple of demographics, the annual median household income, how that compared to the state average, as well as the unemployment rate, and then the population decline from 2014 to 2018. We went through an exercise where we calculated that % grant for each census tract and each census block in San Angelo. In terms of the overall city, the overall city would qualify for 10% grant, but you can also apply, for a project using the tract or the block scores. And in some areas in San Angelo, it's still 10%, but in a lot of areas, it gets up to 40 or 50, even 60% in the northern part of San Angelo, which is a great opportunity for that funding. So we were able to factor that in to the ranking of the problem areas just to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. In terms of the problem area ranking, this is kind of a summary. I know it might be a little small to see, but we basically added up the points in each of the categories for structural, flooding, the roadway inundation, the economic for the % grant, and then the public survey responses. And we developed CIP projects for all of the problem areas that scored over 40 points in that process. So the next part of the presentation, I'll go through the 10 CIP projects that we developed. And this is really one of the areas we're looking for y'all's input on. The highest ranked was the flooding that occurs along Boulevard as it joins with Sherwood Way. Really, to resolve that, it needs to have a trunk line to convey that flow down to the Concho River. We size that as about a 10-foot wide by 5-foot high box.
Let me ask a question. Based off of that being high priority, is that from the citizens' input on that survey, or is this from you all?
It's a combination. There were some citizens that had input around that neighborhood.
'Cause I'm shocked College Hills isn't number one.
It is, but it's already being addressed, I guess, so.
Well, I know, but it wasn't, but I mean, we need to talk realistic. I think College
Absolutely.
Hills is probably number one. Regardless of whether we are addressing it or not, it would have been the number one issue.
Absolutely.
And we need to talk that way, because that's how
Okay.
we finance things, is top priority.
Okay. One of the opportunities, I suppose, with Beauregard is that it's a TxDOT roadway. So, I mean, there's an opportunity for coordination there.
Do they have funding?
I don't know that they have a funding identified for the roadway at this point, but it's just to say in the future, if they are making improvements, then we need to coordinate on getting portions of this trunk line constructed as part of those improvements. In terms of the percent grant for the flood infrastructure fund, the trunk area is in the 10% neighborhood, so it's not as favorable. The upstream areas are about 35% grant, which are a little bit more favorable. It can certainly be constructed in 3 phases, although the first phase needs to be the trunk line to be able to provide, to receive the flows from the other 2 phases. The second project was what we had talked about in terms of the little project for at least reducing some of the overflow from the North Fork Red Arroyo that comes down and aggravates the South Fork. One of the challenges of that crossing is the arroyo itself is so flat that increasing the number of culverts underneath College Hills Boulevard just has very little benefit. We also looked in the Red Arroyo plan at raising College Hills Boulevard, which we didn't find a cost-effective alternative for that, and it had a lot of complications with the driveways and the cross streets as well, which that's why we can't really raise the roadway.
Can you dig deeper in the Red Arroyo so that it holds more water?
It's so flat from there all the way, downstream that you can't really dig deeper and get it to drain by gravity. So it's a challenge, absolutely. And as I mentioned, it's already been incorporated into the roadway improvements. The third project that we looked at is really just looking at the northern part of the city that north of the Concho River. There was a letter of map revision that was done back in 2017 that FEMA calls Lake Creek, and it basically comes down to the city limits and then it stops. And that floodplain doesn't stop, it keeps going, but it's not shown on FEMA's flood insurance rate map. So the area is so flat and it doesn't have any natural drainage creeks or channels to provide a good outfall. We did a quick 2D model of that area, just taking the flows from FEMA's Lomer and seeing where they would go over the terrain, because the city has obtained good LIDAR topo back in 2018. So we took that topo and put the flows over it. And this is kind of a result of how the Lomer flow would make its way down to East Angelo Draw. It's a lot of overland flow and flooding ranging in depth 1 to 2 feet. There would also be additional flow from the local hydrology as well, so it would be worse than that. So that our recommendation would be a hydraulic 2D study to really quantify what the flood risk of that is. I think that would be strongly supported in the Region 9 regional flood plan. This area also is a high percent grant area in terms of 45 and even up to 50 and 60 for parts of it. So that would be an opportunity to get half of the study funded through the flood infrastructure fund, just with grant forgiveness or that loan forgiveness.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on the numbers, so this effort is a $250,000 effort.
Yes, Now that there's good LiDAR topography, it would require an updated hydrology study, and it would require a good number of finished floor elevations of the various homes along different flood paths to verify are they actually, in the floodplain or not. And then it would also include, a couple of alternatives to address the flooding as well that could be further developed for the floodplain. The fourth project that we developed was for the Christian Village storm drain system, and really the new storm drain in College Hills down to the South Fork of Red Arroyo. There's a decent-sized drainage area there to the west of the loop that actually drains across and comes out a drain that comes into an alley there. That's what we call Christian Village. So this is actually taking that flow, putting it underground, and also picking up flow along College Hills as it comes down to the South Fork Red Arroyo. That was recently funded. The area is like a mix of 10% and 30% grant, so it wasn't as favorable from a flood infrastructure fund to begin with. The fifth project is regional detention, basically along Colley Lane, which, as you'll recall, the FEMA Lomer shows a lot of flow coming and basically just stopping at Colley Lane. The opportunity would be to use the roadway ditches along Colley Lane to catch that overflow, bring it to a regional detention where it could be stored, and then pump it over into O.C. Fisher. That would allow, that would protect that area of San Angelo, not allowing the flow to come into the city, and just continue to be overflow through the neighborhoods. It also would have a potential water supply enhancement aspect, which I think would cause it to be fairly highly prioritized in the regional flood plan as well. The area is a 40% grant area, so that could be some pretty favorable financing as well. So that's a project that a new project that we had developed for this plan. In terms of CIP, the sixth project, we're back to the North Fork of Red Arroyo, and really this is more an opportunity where 8.6 acres was recently donated to the city, which is right next to that Pond N2 location. The donation is shown in the red polygon here. So we looked at that, and the question was asked, what benefit can we realize out of that 8.6 acres? So we designed a 2A pond that makes use of that 8.6 acres. We still recommend the N2B pond be done in the future. And then it can be connected to the 2A pond to provide even more benefit than the original N2 detention provided. This area is a 40% grant, or a 10% grant, 10% grant project. So it may not be able to really get favorable financing through the Flood Infrastructure Fund. One other aspect is we're trying to leave the channel natural to the degree we can, because the limit on 404 mitigation is about 300 feet of channel that you could impact before you have to start paying for mitigation credits, which can be very expensive. So the seventh project is along East Angelo Draw, really downstream of the Houston Hart Highway, where the channel is just very undersized, and it floods 2 to 3 blocks of neighborhood as it makes its way diagonal down to the Concho River. The opportunity is that there is a drop in the flow line down there at the ball fields. We would need to excavate a channel upstream, use it to bring that flow line up to be able to get enough elevation drop at the roadways to get culverts under the roadways to prevent their overtopping. So we did a little more analysis on the right-of-way for that channel, which the city already owns a number of parcels along the right-of-way path, as shown in the purple on the map. But there are about 38 parcels that will need to be acquired in order to get enough right-of-way for that channel. This is kind of a graphic of the hydraulic model of the channel that shows the Concho River outfall is there on the left, and it's coming up, and you can see Highway 67 there causes a significant increase. But this would lower the 100-year floodplain by 6 to 7 feet in the lower portion, and it allows a lot of those roadway crossings to have culverts large enough to prevent their overtopping by the 100-year flood as well. This neighborhood is 40 to 50% grant neighborhood, so that's also pretty favorable. It could be constructed in phases as you know, you move from the downstream phase up to the upper sections. The 8th project would be a regional detention in the Glenmore neighborhood. As I mentioned, that area is just so flat that it doesn't have an outfall that you could drain to. So you really have to kind of create an outfall by digging down and having a pond that can store the flow, and then you can pump that out after it stops raining over into East Angelo Draw. By establishing that regional detention pond, you can then put storm drains to bring flows up in the neighborhood.
Let me ask you a question, because
Yes,
when
ma'am.
and we're only on number 8 here, but, you know, even number 1, we're going to struggle to find the money for. So the issue is, great, we've got a drainage study that clearly identifies issues, and in today's dollars, the amount of money it will take to resolve the flooding issues. Here's the problem. We don't have enough money for item 1. So it's great we have this, but our ability to address these issues on the bigger picture as presented is going to be like not realistic. So instead of creating a most perfect scenario of each of these areas and the dollars it's going to take and the problems it's going to solve, are there not potential opportunities to solve some of these problems that aren't in the billions of dollars? Because we're looking at a perfect world. If we could do everything we wanted, this is what we would ask you to do. But it's not realistic. We need a realistic approach to the flooding issues. This is a design perfect world approach. I know that leaves you breathless, as it does us sitting here.
Mayor, as we start looking at this, and one thing that we've not always been good at the city is having plans in place for the future for if we do have grant funding opportunities. Of course, Texas Water Development Board has placed some funding out there that is out there and available for us, but we also have other funding opportunities that come along as well too when we start looking at hazard mitigation grant opportunities and other grant opportunities. And if we have these that are already designed, they're in a plan, they're in a book, they'll be eligible for those grant funds. And so while some of this is pie in the sky kind of a view of some of these projects, and it is very overwhelming when you start looking at these dollar figures on here, having this plan in place and having it to where we can look at it and we can go grab these plans when some of these other dollars come available, and so we have this ready to go tackle, and we're not way behind the the ball on this one. We're right there. We have it in our sights. We have it in our grasp, and we can grab it. We can go to whatever the agency is and say, here, look, we have a plan in place. We're ready to go. We want your grant dollars. And so, again, is some of this unrealistic is for us to be able to tackle in the next 10, 20 years? Yes, more than likely. But again, we do have the plan in place, so if those funds do become available, and especially when you look at some of these areas, and of course we do have a typo right there, that should be Bradford, not Glenmore, but in this Bradford area, if we look at this and we're going to drain this, and this is a 60% grant area, and we take that, and we can get 60%, grant forgiveness or loan forgiveness there, and then if we take this and get other dollars available to offset that as well too, I think in the long term that's where we go. Well, again, like I said, this is only one funding source that has just recently become available.
Yes, but this is only one program right here.
Yes.
Another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, when you add them all up, are 3 times that amount.
Yep.
And I know we needed to do this. I get it. But I also get the realism of where we sit today.
Correct.
And even if we could get a 60% fund and then find a few other things, I don't know where you find the balance of this. And this is Project 8.
And we had them just go through the top 10 prioritized projects. I mean, there's 35 on the list that we have. And so, again, we just picked the top 10. Again, we have plans in place to as we move into the future. And again, Mayor, we know that we realize that some of this is unrealistic, and we may never see these funds. I mean, it took us 20 years to start finding funding for Avenue P and for the work that we did that we've already done on Bell Street for the East Angelo draw there. But of course, as we look at College Hills, of course, stranger things have happened, but we were able to find the $8.5 million that we needed to address some of the drainage along the southern portion of College Hills. And so, as we're going through, these funding opportunities do present themselves, and again, we're prepared at that point to be able to take advantage of them. And so that's where this plan comes into place, is that we're prepared to take advantage of those funding opportunities when and if they come along.
But what I also get is the following. If you take a look at this one, CIP 08, Bradford Detention, the realism is the following. Coming up with this money, and this is number 8, it's not number 1 priority or not number 2 priority, is the following. If you can't get 100% of the money, but you can get 50% of the money, is there a Plan B instead of the Plan A for the big dollars on Project 1? So that you say, okay, if I've got $20 million and I can find $20 million on the CIP number 1, what does if you had $20 million, what would you spend that $20 million on the first strategy 1? And so that you have A, B, and C approaches to it instead of just the great big picture that, we all are.
Yes, ma'am. And these are broken out into phases to where these can be phased over time.
That's the key thing we have to talk about.
Yep. They did when they created these, they are phased approaches. So we can start on the downstream side of these projects. If we have the whole project's a $20 million project and we have $3 million to start, we can actually work on phase A and work our way through it. And again, it may take us 20 or 30 years to get there, but eventually over time, as opportunities arise, we will get there.
I'm glad you think we'll get there with all of this, but I'm looking at it and I'm going, wow. And there'll be new problems that come up that's not in this plan. And these are only the top 10. They don't address how many of them?
Yeah, I think we identified 35.
Yeah, there's another 13 after this that were identified in the original 2000 study.
And we don't have the money for one.
Yes, ma'am. But again, we have to be positive,
got a plan
Mayor.
here.
We got a plan. We have to be positive, Mayor.
I'm very positive and very focused and very realistic.
And there will be a lot of benefit on the right-of-way side as well. I mean, because the city really needs to be opportunistic in terms of if a property becomes available that is along the right-of-way of one of these projects, then, I mean, that may, the city may be able to acquire kind of some target properties in the future to help facilitate that. The 10th priority is immediately downstream of this regional detention, basically going, there's a intersection there at 24th and Poe that was one of the original 2000 master drainage plan problem areas as well. It needs an improved channel downstream and then improved culverts underneath the intersection. And then the last project is the intersection of Pecan at 3rd Street, where the channel upstream has got, 5 48-inch culverts under 4th Street, but then the channel comes to the intersection at 3rd Street and it just crosses the intersection at grade, which is a really challenging drainage issue. Really what needs to happen is the channel downstream needs to be deepened so that we can get culverts underneath that intersection and provide protection to of that intersection. This area is also, more than 50% grant funded, so that's a good opportunity. So as you were alluding to earlier, when you sum the projects up, they do come to significant amounts. Really, that first project for Boulevard, that's going to depend on TxDOT funding. So that would just be part of improvements of that roadway in the future at some point that TxDOT would do. The fourth project there, the Christian Village drainage at College Hills Boulevard, has already been funded. So really, it's the and the second project has already been incorporated as well. So it's recognizing that the city has started making some good, solid progress on the list, but there still are opportunities to reduce flooding around the city. In terms of when you look at that list, there's a total cost of the projects. We factored in for any of the projects that had over a 40% grant possibility. If we were to utilize that, it would allow us to do these 10 projects and save the city $15 million through that flood infrastructure
Not the
fund.
savings, it's what's the final cost?
It's still significant, although the $50 million does include the Beauregard as well as the $9 million that's already been funded. So,
Well, obviously, we have to look at these things, and we cannot pretend they don't exist. There are issues in almost everyone's district, so they're certainly top of mind and certainly issues that we have to address. So I'm glad we've done the study. I'm glad we have the information. Now we got to figure out how to get it done.
and then we did update the costs. As Shane mentioned, there was 13 other projects that were developed back in 2000. And we updated those costs and brought that forward as well. And so the next steps are to receive your input today, certainly on any of the 10 projects that we discussed. And we'll incorporate your input and finalize the report. We're also providing the GIS shape files so that, so that Shane will have a layer of properties that he can watch out for as things happen. The other thing would be we would provide this report to the Region 9 Upper Colorado Regional Flood Planning Group for them to incorporate the CIP projects into their list of projects as a region. So, and that draft regional plan is due in August of next year. So it's a slow-moving process, but hopefully we can start addressing some of the flooding problems, or continue addressing the flooding problems in San Angelo. So, sorry.
Do we have questions from council? I think we're overwhelmed. We're speechless. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all very much.
With that, that concludes our regular agenda. There's no closed session today, so we will follow up on administrative issues. Announcements and consideration for future agenda items, are there any?
Mayor, I would
Yes,
like to
ma'am.
see if Morgan would come up here again or for our next meeting and just remind our constituents of the dog ordinance that people are saying that they're having problems with so many dogs running around the neighborhood.
You know, the
all over
problem
town.
with dogs running around are people.
Yes, I
'cause
understand that, but
people is the problem here.
if we can be reminded of what happens if you do not take care of your dog, that you'll be paying fines for them.
We'll have Megan and Bob Salas come forward and give us a presentation. Any further future agenda items? With none, may I have a motion for dismissal?
Move with adjourn.
Second.
No one opposed? Meeting concludes, and it is 10:20 a.m.